The ships came on a Tuesday morning. They appeared without warning, blocking out the sun over every major city on Earth. They were massive beyond imagination, each one larger than a mountain, and they hung in the sky like a promise of death. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and it was terrifying. The Keth Empire had conquered 47 worlds across the galaxy. They were ancient, powerful, and utterly without mercy. To them, other species existed only to serve or to die. There was no middle ground. There was no negotiation. There was only submission. Their leader, General Varric, sent a simple message to every screen on Earth. His face filled television sets, computers, and phones across the planet. He was reptilian, with scales the color of dark iron and eyes like burning yellow fire. When he spoke, his voice was deep and cold. "People of Earth," he said, "you have been selected for integration into the Keth Empire. You will send representatives to the neutral station called Helios Prime. There, you will accept our terms. If you refuse, your world will burn. You have 3 days." The message ended. Panic spread across the globe like wildfire. World leaders gathered in emergency meetings. Militaries prepared for a war they knew they could not win. Scientists studied the alien ships and found technology centuries beyond anything humans had created. Some people prayed. Some people cried. Some people simply waited for the end, but others refused to give up hope. The United Nations assembled a delegation to meet the aliens. They chose diplomats, scientists, and translators. They also chose soldiers, not to fight, but to observe, to learn, and if the moment came, to show the aliens that humanity would not simply bow its head and accept death. Among those soldiers was a man named Kang Dae. Dae was 38 years old. He had served in the Republic of Korea's Special Warfare Command for nearly 2 decades. He was not tall. He was not particularly large. If you passed him on the street, you would not notice him. He had the kind of face that people forgot easily. He wore his silence like armor and his calm like a mask, but those who knew him understood what he truly was. He had trained in martial arts since he was 6 years old. He had mastered techniques that most people did not even know existed. He had fought in conflicts that never made the news, in places that officially did not exist. His body was covered in scars that told stories he would never share. When his commanding officer asked him to join the delegation, Dae simply nodded. He did not ask questions. He did not complain. He packed a small bag and boarded the shuttle that would take him to Helios Prime. The station was located in the empty space between Earth and Mars. It was neutral ground, maintained by an alliance of alien species that the Keth had not yet conquered. The station was enormous, a spinning wheel of metal and glass that housed thousands of beings from dozens of worlds. They had never seen aliens before. Now he saw them everywhere. Creatures with too many eyes. Beings made of living crystal. Things that floated through the air without wings. He watched them all carefully, noting how they moved, how they reacted, where their weak points might be. The human delegation was led by Ambassador Yoon Hannah. She was a small woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and sharp eyes. She had spent her entire career in diplomacy, solving problems that others said could not be solved. She did not believe in impossible situations. She believed that every enemy had a weakness, and every negotiation had a path to victory. When she first met Dae, she studied him for a long moment. "You are the soldier they sent?" "Yes, Ambassador. You do not look like much." Dae's expression did not change. "No, Ambassador. I do not." Hannah smiled slightly. She understood what he meant. The best weapons rarely looked dangerous until it was too late. The meeting with the Keth took place in a great hall at the center of Helios Prime. The room was designed to intimidate. with ceilings that rose 50 meters high and walls covered in the banners of conquered worlds. Each banner represented a species that had surrendered to the Keth. Some of those species no longer existed. General Vorak sat on a throne at the far end of the hall. He was even larger in person than he had appeared on the screens. His body was covered in thick scales, and his hands ended in claws that looked capable of tearing through steel. Behind him stood his officers, each one a veteran of countless conquests. When the human delegation entered, the Keth began to laugh. It was not subtle laughter. It was loud, mocking, and cruel. They pointed at the humans and made jokes in their guttural language. Some of them made gestures suggesting that the humans were small, weak, and pathetic. They walked behind Ambassador Hannah with his hands clasped behind his back. His face showed nothing, but his eyes were busy, studying every Keth in the room, analyzing their stances, their movements, their armor. He was looking for weaknesses. He was always looking for weaknesses. General Vorak raised one massive hand, and the laughter stopped immediately. He leaned forward on his throne and examined the humans like a collector examining insects. "These are Earth's representatives?" he said. His voice echoed through the hall. "These tiny, soft creatures?" Ambassador Hannah stepped forward and bowed her head slightly. Not in submission, but in formal greeting. "I am Ambassador Yoon Hannah of Earth. We have come to discuss terms." "Discuss?" Vorak smiled, revealing rows of teeth like broken glass. "There is nothing to discuss. You will hear our demands. You will accept them. That is all." Hannah's expression remained calm. "We would still like to hear what you propose, General." Vorak waved one clawed hand dismissively. "Very well. If it amuses you to pretend this is a negotiation, we will play along." He gestured to one of his officers, who began reading from a list. The demands were exactly what everyone had feared. Total disarmament. Tribute shipments of Earth's resources. Conscription of humans into labor camps. The end of human self-governance. Complete submission to Keth rule. As the officer read, they noticed something. Several Keth warriors were staring at him specifically. They seemed confused by him. He was clearly a soldier, standing at attention behind the ambassador, but he did not look like a soldier to them. He was too small, too calm, too still. One of them whispered something to his companion and laughed. They did not react. He simply continued to watch and wait. The reading of demands took nearly an hour. When it was finished, Vorak spread his arms wide. "These are our terms. Accept them, and your people will live as servants of the Keth Empire. Refuse them, and your world will become ash." Ambassador Hannah was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was steady and clear. "We need time to consider your proposal." Vorak laughed. "Time? You have until tomorrow, little ambassador. Use it wisely." The meeting was adjourned. As the human delegation left the hall, they glanced back one final time. General Vorak was watching him with those burning yellow eyes, a look of contempt on his face. They turned away and followed his ambassador. Tomorrow would come soon enough. The human delegation spent the night in small quarters on Helios Prime. The rooms were simple but clean, designed for species of many different sizes and shapes. They sat alone in his room thinking about what he had seen. The Keth were physically powerful. That much was obvious. They were larger than humans, stronger than humans, and covered in natural armor. Their claws and teeth were weapons built into their bodies. In a direct contest of strength, a human would lose every time. But they had noticed something else. The Keth moved like creatures who had never truly been challenged. They were confident to the point of arrogance. They assumed their size and strength would always be enough. They had never learned to be careful. This was useful information. Ambassador Hana called a meeting of the delegation in the early hours of the morning. She looked tired but determined. She had spent the night reviewing the Keth demands and searching for any way to save Earth without complete surrender. "The terms are impossible," she said quietly. "If we accept them, our people become slaves. Our planet becomes a mining colony. Our children will grow up serving Keth masters." She paused. "I will not sign such an agreement." One of the other diplomats spoke up. "But if we refuse, they will attack. Our military cannot stop them. We have no defense against their technology." "I know," Hana said. "But there must be another way." "There is always another way." They listened in silence. He had nothing to contribute to discussions of diplomacy and politics. His skills lay elsewhere. But he remained alert, watching the faces of his fellow delegates, waiting for the moment when he might be useful. The second meeting with General Vorak began at midday station time. The Great Hall was even more crowded than before. Word had spread among the other species on Helios Prime that the humans were about to surrender, and many had come to watch the spectacle. Vorak sat on his throne with a satisfied expression. He clearly expected this meeting to be short. The humans would accept his terms, sign whatever documents he demanded, and Earth would become the 48th world under Keth control. It was routine. It was inevitable. It was boring to him. Ambassador Hana walked to the center of the hall and stood before the throne. Day took his position behind her, exactly as he had the day before. "General Vorak," Hana began, "we have reviewed your terms, and—" Vorak did not even bother to sit up straight. "Are you ready to sign?" "We cannot accept your terms as they stand." The hall went quiet. The other aliens who had come to watch exchanged confused glances. No one refused the Keth. It simply was not done. Vorak's eyes narrowed. For a moment, he seemed genuinely surprised. Then his expression darkened into anger. "You refuse?" His voice was low and dangerous. "The terms are unacceptable," Hana said calmly. "We propose modifications. We are willing to establish trade relations with the Keth Empire. We are willing to share certain resources. But we will not accept slavery. We will not accept the end of our independence." Vorak stood slowly. He was enormous, nearly 3 meters tall, and his shadow fell across the entire human delegation. The other Keth officers shifted nervously. They had seen their general angry before. It never ended well for whoever had caused that anger. "You misunderstand your position," Vorak said. "You are not here to negotiate. You are here to surrender. Those are your only options." "Then we have a problem," Hana replied, "because surrender is not something we are prepared to offer." For a long moment, Vorak simply stared at her. Then he began to laugh. It was a harsh, ugly sound that echoed through the hall. His officers joined in, and soon the entire Keth delegation was laughing at the small human woman who dared to defy them. Vorak stepped down from his throne and walked across the hall toward the humans. His footsteps were heavy, each one making the floor shake slightly. He stopped directly in front of Ambassador Hana, towering over her like a mountain over a pebble. "You have courage," he said. "I will grant you that. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless." He looked past her at the other members of the delegation. His yellow eyes stopped on Day. "You," Vorak said, pointing one clawed finger. "Step forward." Day did not hesitate. He walked around Ambassador Hana and stood before the general, looking up at the massive alien without any expression on his face. Vorak studied him like a scientist examining a strange specimen. "You are a soldier, yes? I can see it in how you stand, how you watch, how you move." "I am," Day said simply. Vorak circled around him slowly, his claws clicking against the floor. "On my world, soldiers are selected for strength, for size, for the ability to crush enemies with their bare hands. He stopped behind Day and leaned down, his hot breath washing over the human's neck. You do not seem to have any of these qualities. Day did not turn around. He kept his eyes forward. We have different methods of selection. Different methods? Vorak laughed again. What method would select you? You are small. You are thin. You have no natural weapons. No armor. No claws. He walked back around to face Day directly. On my world, we would use creatures like you to clean our boots. You would not even qualify as food. The Keth officers laughed appreciatively at their general's joke. Vorak pressed closer, lowering his massive head until his face was centimeters from Day's. His breath smelled like sulfur and rotting meat. Your bones would break like dry sticks in my hands. Your skin would tear like wet paper. You are nothing. Your species is nothing. You survive only because we have not yet decided to end you. Day met the general's yellow eyes without flinching. His heartbeat remained steady. His breathing remained calm. He had faced death before, many times, and he recognized that this was not it. This was just talk. Vorak was trying to intimidate him, to make him afraid, to prove a point about human weakness. Is that what you believe? Day asked quietly. Vorak's smile widened, showing all of his terrible teeth. It is what I know, little creature. It is what everyone in this hall knows. It is what your own people know, even if they are too proud to admit it. He straightened up and turned to address the watching crowd. Look at these humans. Look at their champion. This is what Earth sends to face the Keth Empire. The hall erupted in laughter from dozens of different species. The humans had become a joke, a source of entertainment before their inevitable surrender. Ambassador Hana watched the scene with careful eyes. She saw the mockery. She saw the contempt, but she also saw something else. She saw the way Day stood perfectly still in the middle of it all. She saw the calm certainty in his eyes. She saw a man who knew something that Vorak did not. And in that moment, she began to form a plan. A dangerous plan. A desperate plan. But possibly the only plan that could save Earth. She stepped forward, and her voice cut through the laughter like a knife. General Vorak, if you find our soldiers so unimpressive, perhaps you would welcome a demonstration. The laughter stopped. Every eye in the hall turned to the small human woman who had just said something very unexpected. Vorak turned slowly, his expression suddenly interested. A demonstration? Hannah smiled. A contest. The great hall fell completely silent. Ambassador Hana's words hung in the air like smoke, unexpected and dangerous. Every creature in the room was staring at her, trying to understand what she had just proposed. General Vorak's yellow eyes gleamed with sudden interest. He had expected the humans to beg. He had expected them to cry and plead, and eventually sign whatever documents he placed before them. He had not expected this. A contest? He repeated slowly, as if tasting the word. What sort of contest? Hana clasped her hands behind her back. Her posture was perfectly calm, but inside her chest, her heart was racing. Everything depended on the next few minutes. One wrong word could doom her entire planet. A simple contest of combat, she said. Your finest warrior against ours, unarmed, no weapons, no armor, no technology. Just two fighters, one from each species, testing their abilities against each other. Murmurs spread through the watching crowd. This was not how negotiations usually worked. This was not how weaker species behaved when facing the Keth. Several alien observers leaned forward in their seats, suddenly very interested in what was happening. Vorak tilted his massive head. You wish to fight us? Physically? With your bare hands against ours? He seemed genuinely confused by the idea. You understand that we would destroy you? Perhaps, Hana said. Perhaps not. That is the nature of a contest. The outcome is uncertain until it is completed. There is nothing uncertain about this, Vorak said. A Keth warrior against a human? It would not even be interesting. It would be over in seconds. Then you have nothing to lose by accepting. Vorak paused. He had not expected that response. The small human woman was using his own confidence against him. If he refused the contest, it would look like weakness. It would look like fear. The other species in the hall would whisper that the mighty Keth were afraid to face a single human in combat. He could not allow that. What are the terms? He asked carefully. Hannah had prepared for this question. If your fighter wins, we will sign your documents. We will accept every term you have proposed. Earth will submit to Keth rule completely and without further resistance. Vorak nodded slowly. That was acceptable. That was what he wanted anyway. And if your fighter wins, your fleet withdraws from Earth's system. You leave our planet alone, permanently. No invasion. No demands. No contact unless we initiate it. The hall erupted in noise. Keth officers shouted in outrage. Alien observers gasped in surprise. No one had ever made such a demand of the Keth Empire. No one had ever had the courage or the madness to suggest such a thing. Vorak raised one hand and silence fell again. His officers were staring at him, waiting for him to reject this absurd proposal and order the human delegation executed for their insolence. But Vorak was not thinking about rejection. He was thinking about entertainment. The conquest of Earth was inevitable. His fleet was overwhelming. The humans had no way to resist. The outcome was already decided, which meant it was boring. Vorak had conquered too many worlds. He had watched too many species surrender without a real fight. He was hungry for something different. This contest could be that different thing. He would select his greatest warrior, a fighter who had never been defeated, and watch as that warrior destroyed the human champion in front of witnesses from across the galaxy. It would be a demonstration of Keth superiority that everyone would remember. It would be legendary. And when it was over, Earth would still be his. I accept your terms, Vorak said. His officers looked shocked, but none dared to question their general's decision. The alien observers began talking excitedly among themselves. This was unprecedented. This was extraordinary. This was worth watching. Hannah allowed herself one small breath of relief. The first part of her plan had worked. Now came the harder part. When will the contest take place? Now, Vorak said. Why wait? Unless your fighter needs time to prepare. Hannah glanced back at Bay. He stood exactly where he had been standing throughout the entire conversation, motionless and silent. He had heard everything. He understood what was being asked of him. The fate of Earth, of 8 billion people, was about to rest on his shoulders. He met her eyes and gave one small nod. Our fighter is ready, Hannah said. Vorak smiled widely. Excellent. Then let us proceed to the arena. He turned to one of his officers. Bring Commander Thol. The name caused a reaction even among the Keth. Officers straightened their postures. Some of them exchanged glances that might have been concern. The alien observers who knew the name began whispering to those who did not. Commander Thol was a legend. He was the greatest warrior the Keth Empire had ever produced. He had fought in over 200 single combats and had won every single one. He had killed champions from 12 different conquered worlds. He was said to be unstoppable, unkillable, a force of nature. Shaped like a living creature, he was the worst possible opponent for any fighter, from any species. And Vorak had chosen him on purpose. The great hall emptied as everyone moved toward the arena. It was a large circular pit built into the floor of the station, surrounded by rising seats where spectators could watch from safety. The floor was made of hard stone that could be easily cleaned between fights. Day removed his uniform jacket and handed it to Ambassador Hana. Underneath, he wore a simple black shirt. His arms were lean and muscular, marked with scars that told stories of past battles. He stretched slowly, loosening his muscles, preparing his body for what was to come. Hana took the jacket with both hands. Her face was pale. "Lieutenant Kang, I need to tell you something. You did not know about Thol when you made the challenge," they said quietly. It was not a question. No, I thought they would choose an ordinary warrior. Someone impressive but beatable. I did not know they had. She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "It does not matter," they said. "The contest is set. The terms are agreed. There is no backing out now. I am sorry. I may have sent you to your death." They looked at her with calm eyes. "Ambassador, I have faced death many times. It does not frighten me. What frightens me is the thought of my country, my people, living under the rule of creatures like these." He nodded toward the Keth officers gathering around the arena. "Whatever happens in that pit, I will not shame humanity. I will not surrender. I will not beg." Hannah blinked back tears she could not afford to show. "Good luck, Lieutenant." They did not respond. He was already focused on the arena. The chamber doors at the far end of the arena opened, and Commander Thul entered. He was enormous. Even among the Keth, he was massive, standing nearly 3 meters tall. His body was a mountain of muscle covered in scales so thick they looked like armor plates. His arms were as wide as tree trunks. His hands ended in claws that could tear through metal. His face was the face of a nightmare, all teeth and fury and ancient hunger. He walked into the arena and stopped in the center, looking across at Day with obvious amusement. To him, this was not a contest. This was a joke. He had killed beings twice the size of this human. He had crushed warriors who were stronger, faster, and better armed. This tiny creature was nothing. "Little human," Thol said, his voice like rolling thunder. "I will try not to break you too quickly. It would be disappointing if this ended before it even began." Day stepped into the arena. He looked ridiculously small compared to Thol. The difference in size was almost comical. Alien observers pointed and laughed. Keth warriors made betting gestures, wagering on how many seconds Thol would need to end this farce. But Day's face showed nothing. No fear, no doubt, no emotion of any kind. He simply waited. A Keth officer stepped to the edge of the arena and raised his hand. "The contest will begin on my signal. Fight until one cannot continue. There are no other rules." He dropped his hand. The signal was given. Commander Thol moved first. He exploded across the arena like a living avalanche, covering the distance between them in 2 massive strides. His right arm swung in a devastating arc, claws extended, aimed at Day's chest. The strike carried enough force to shatter stone. It had crushed the rib cages of a dozen champions from a dozen. Conquered worlds. It hit nothing but empty air. Day had already moved. Not backward, where Thul expected him to flee. Instead, he stepped forward and to the side, slipping past the attack by centimeters. His body flowed like water around the massive arm. And for one brief moment, he was inside Thul's guard. Completely untouched. His palm struck the inside of Thul's elbow with precise, focused power. A sharp crack echoed through the arena. Thul roared in pain and confusion. He had never felt anything like that before. His arm was not broken, but something inside the joint had shifted wrong. The limb felt weak and strange. He stumbled back, staring at the small human who had somehow hurt him. The watching crowd went silent. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody made betting gestures. Something unexpected was happening. Thul attacked again, this time with his left arm. He swung a backhanded blow that could have knocked down a wall. Again, Day was not there. He ducked under the strike, his movement so smooth it looked almost casual. His heel drove into the back of Thul's knee with devastating accuracy. The giant buckled. For one terrible moment, he was off balance, his weight shifting in ways he could not control. They did not waste the opportunity. His elbow came up in a spinning strike that connected with Thul's temple. The impact was small compared to the alien's massive skull, but it was placed exactly where it needed to be. Stars exploded in Thul's vision. His head rang like a bell. He swung wildly, desperately, trying to catch the human with anything. His claws cut through the air in wide arcs. Each strike could have killed a normal opponent instantly. None of them found their target. Day moved between the attacks like he was walking through falling rain without getting wet. Every movement was small, precise, and perfectly timed. He never wasted energy. He never moved more than absolutely necessary. It was a kind of combat the Keth had never seen before. The Keth evolved on a harsh world where strength meant survival. Their entire culture was built around the idea that the biggest and strongest warrior would always win. They had conquered species across the galaxy by being physically superior. It had always worked, but humans evolved differently. Humans were small. Humans were weak. Humans had no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. If they fought like the Keth, using raw strength against raw strength, they would lose every time. So they did not fight like the Kete. Instead, humanity spent 10,000 years developing something else. They created fighting systems that used an enemy's strength against them. They invented techniques that targeted weak points in any body. They learned how to redirect force, to use leverage, to turn disadvantages into advantages. They called these systems by many names: martial arts, combat sports, fighting styles. But they all shared the same basic truth. A smaller fighter could defeat a larger one if they were skilled enough and smart enough. Day had spent his entire life mastering these systems. He had studied styles from Korea, Japan, China, Brazil, Thailand, and a dozen other nations. He had combined them into something uniquely effective. He had tested his skills against other humans in training halls and on real battlefields. Now he was testing them against something far more dangerous. Thul charged again. His massive arms spread wide to grab and crush. It was the same tactic he had used against countless opponents. He would catch them, wrap them in his grip, and squeeze until their bones turned to powder. Day dropped low and shot forward. His shoulder connected with Thul's hip. His hands grabbed the back of the alien's legs. With a twist of his body and a shift of his weight, he redirected Thul's momentum. The giant went flying over him and crashed onto the stone floor. The arena shook with the impact. Thul lay stunned for a moment, unable to understand what had just happened. He had been thrown. Him, Commander Thul, thrown by a creature less than half his size. He pushed himself up, rage burning in his eyes. Green blood dripped from a cut on his forehead. His injured arm hung slightly wrong at his side. He was hurt. Actually hurt. By a human. What are you? Thul growled. They did not answer. He simply waited in a relaxed stance, his hands open, his weight balanced perfectly on both feet. His breathing was slightly faster than normal, but otherwise he showed no signs of effort. Thul roared and attacked again. And again. And again. Each time, Day slipped away from his strikes. Each time, Day countered with precise blows to joints, to pressure points, to vulnerable spots that even Thul's armored hide could not fully protect. The fight continued for several more minutes. To the watching crowd, it looked like something impossible. The massive Keth champion was being systematically dismantled by a creature he should have been able to kill with one hand. Every time Thul swung, he missed. Every time he tried to grab, his hands closed on empty air. Every time he thought he had trapped the human, they found an escape route that should not have existed, and with every passing second, the damage accumulated. A strike to the throat that made Thol choke. A kick to the knee that made him limp. A punch to the solar plexus that drove the breath from his lungs. None of them were killing blows, but together they were wearing him down like water wearing down stone. Finally, Thol overcommitted to a wild swing, and Day made his move. He stepped behind the giant, jumped onto his back, and wrapped his arm around Thol's throat. His legs locked around Thol's torso. His forearm pressed against the alien's windpipe with crushing pressure. Thol thrashed violently. He reached back with both arms, his claws scraping against Day's sides, drawing blood. He spun and bucked, trying to shake the human off. He slammed his own back against the arena wall, crushing Day between stone and scales. Day held on. His face was pressed against Thol's shoulder, his eyes squeezed shut against the pain. He could feel his ribs creaking. He could feel the claws tearing his flesh. But he did not let go. He could not let go. Seconds passed. They felt like hours. Thol's movements began to slow. His struggles became weaker. The oxygen was being cut off from his brain. His mighty body, which had never known defeat, was failing him. His claws stopped scratching. His arms fell to his sides. His legs buckled. Commander Thol, the greatest warrior of the Keth Empire, collapsed face first onto the arena floor with a sound like a falling mountain. Day held the choke for 5 more seconds, making absolutely certain. Then he released his grip and rolled away, lying on his back on the cold stone, breathing hard. His shirt was torn and soaked with blood. His body screamed with pain from a dozen wounds, but he was alive, and Thol was not moving. The arena was completely silent. Thousands of beings from dozens of species stared at the scene before them, unable to believe what they had witnessed. The undefeatable champion had been defeated. The monster had been brought down by a creature that should have been nothing more than prey. Day pushed himself slowly to his feet. Blood dripped from his wounds onto the floor. His legs trembled beneath him. But he stood, and then he looked up at General Varrock. The general's face had turned a sickly gray color. His yellow eyes were wide with something he had never felt before in his long career of conquest: fear. The silence in the arena stretched on for what felt like forever. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The entire station seemed to hold its breath. Kang Day stood alone in the center of the fighting pit, swaying slightly on his feet. His body was covered in blood, some of it his own, some of it Tol's. The wounds from the alien's claws burned like fire. His ribs ached where they had been slammed against stone. Every breath sent pain shooting through his chest. But he remained standing behind him. Commander Thol lay motionless on the cold floor. The greatest warrior of the Keth Empire, the undefeatable champion of a dozen worlds, had been brought down. He was still alive, still breathing, but he was completely unconscious. His defeat was total. They turned slowly and walked toward the edge of the arena. His steps were careful and measured. He would not show weakness now, not when everything depended on strength. He stopped beneath the viewing platform where General Varrock sat frozen on his throne. "Impossible," Varrock whispered. His voice was barely audible, but in the perfect silence, everyone heard it. "This is impossible." Day looked up at the general. Despite everything he had just endured, his dark eyes were steady and clear. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried through the entire hall. "You look at us and see soft flesh," he said. "Small bodies. No claws, no fangs, no natural armor. You see creatures who should be easy to crush, easy to conquer, easy to forget." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But you do not understand what we are. You do not understand what we have become. Vorak's officers shifted uncomfortably. Several of them reached for their weapons, but no one dared to actually draw. The terms of the contest had been agreed upon. Breaking them now, in front of witnesses from across the galaxy, would destroy the Keth Empire's reputation forever. Humanity has fought itself for 10,000 years, they continued. We have waged wars that killed millions. We have invented weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We have battled over land, over resources, over ideas, over nothing at all. We are creatures of conflict. It is in our blood. It is in our bones. He raised one hand and pointed at the unconscious form of Thol. You evolved to be strong. We evolved to defeat the strong. Every technique I used against your champion was developed over centuries of human warfare. Every movement was refined through generations of bloodshed. We did not survive by being the biggest or the fastest or the most powerful. We survived by being smarter, by being more adaptable, by never, ever giving up. General Vorak gripped the arms of his throne so hard that the metal began to bend under his claws. His face was still that sickly gray color. He wanted to order his soldiers to attack. He wanted to watch this small, irritating human torn to pieces. But he could not. The contest had been witnessed by too many. The terms had been agreed upon in front of representatives from dozens of species. If he broke his word now, the Keth Empire would become known as Oath Breakers. Other species would unite against them. Trade agreements would collapse. Alliances would shatter. The conquest of one small planet was not worth that cost. But more than that, he was afraid. For the first time in his long life, Vorak was genuinely afraid. If one human could defeat Thol, the greatest Keth warrior ever born, then what could an entire planet of such humans do? What would happen if Earth was invaded and its billions of inhabitants fought back with the same skill and determination? It would be a bloodbath. It might even be a defeat. Vorak had built his career on knowing when to fight and when to withdraw. He had conquered 47 worlds by choosing his battles wisely. Earth, he now realized, was not a battle worth choosing. We are not fragile, General, they said, his voice cutting through Vorak's thoughts. We are compressed. All of our aggression, all of our violence, all of our survival instinct is packed into these small bodies. You thought we were weak because we do not look like predators. But we are the deadliest predators our world ever produced. We drove every other competitor to extinction. We conquered our entire planet. And if you force us to, we will find a way to conquer you too. He stopped speaking. The words hung in the air like a challenge and a warning. Ambassador Hannah stepped forward, moving to stand beside her wounded soldier. Her voice rang out clear and strong across the silent hall. The terms were agreed upon, General Vorak. Your fighter has been defeated. Your fleet will withdraw from Earth's system immediately. Every eye in the chamber turned to Vorak. His officers watched him with expressions of shock and uncertainty. The alien observers leaned forward in their seats, waiting to see what would happen. This was a moment that would be remembered for centuries. This was history being made. Vorak sat completely still for a long moment. The war between his pride and his fear played out behind his yellow eyes. Part of him wanted to order the attack anyway. Part of him wanted to destroy these arrogant humans and burn their little planet to ash. But another part of him, the part that had kept him alive through decades of conquest, whispered that this was not a fight he could win. Not today. Not ever. He looked down at Tol's body, still lying motionless in the arena. His greatest warrior, his undefeatable champion, brought down by a creature half his size. Withdraw the fleet, Vorak said quietly. The words seemed to pain him physically. His officers stared in disbelief. A low murmur ran through the crowd of alien observers. The Keth Empire, for the first time in its history, was backing down. One of Vorak's officers stepped forward. General, Surely we cannot simply, I said, withdraw the fleet. Vorak roared. His voice echoed through the hall like thunder. Do it now. The officer bowed hastily and hurried away to carry out the order. Vorak turned back to Day and Hannah. His face was twisted with hatred and something that might have been respect. This is not over, humans. Your little planet has earned a temporary reprieve. Nothing more. We will be watching you. And if you ever show weakness, if you ever let your guard down, we will return. Day met his gaze without flinching. We will be waiting. The human delegation left the great hall together. Ambassador Hana supported Day as they walked, helping him stay upright despite his wounds. Medical teams would be waiting for them on the shuttle. Soon he would be treated, healed, and celebrated as the hero who saved Earth. But for now, they simply walked away from the empire that had threatened to enslave their species. They walked away from the general who had mocked them and the warriors who had laughed at them. They walked away victorious. At the doorway, they stopped and looked back one final time. The Keth warriors stood frozen in the great hall, staring after the humans with expressions of shock and confusion. They had come expecting to watch another species surrender. Instead, they had watched their champion fall and their empire humbled. Tell your people what happened here today, Day said. His voice carried across the hall one final time. Tell them that Earth is not a world to be conquered. Tell them that humanity is not a species to be underestimated. He paused. And tell them that this is where conquerors come to fall. Then he turned and walked through the doorway, leaving the stunned Keth behind him. Outside, through the viewing windows of Helios Prime, he could see the massive alien warships beginning to turn away from Earth's distant blue glow. They were leaving. Humanity had one dot, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, word began to spread. Stories passed from ship to ship, from station to station, from world to world. Stories about a small species from an insignificant planet that had looked into the face of the galaxy's greatest conquering empire and refused to kneel. Earth was not prey, the stories said. Earth was something else entirely, something the galaxy had never seen before, something that would change everything.